Rabbi Joseph, it is Wednesday. I am about to head to Florida, where I will be doing a wedding, and my family will be going to Disney World without me. But before I head out
Wait,
of
wait a
town,
minute. Wait a minute. You're doing a wedding, and the family is which of those has a symmetry?
yeah, I don't even know how. So yeah,
Okay.
it'll be a trip.
Da-da-boom.
But before I head out of town, I wanted to talk to you, and so you have on the docket today this article from the New Yorker titled "The Vatican and the War in Gaza." The subtitle says, "A rhetorical dispute between the church and the Israeli government shows the limits and the possibilities of the Pope's role in times of conflict." This is by Paul Ellie. So summarize this article for us before you give your thoughts for us.
It's a fascinating historical moment. Um, Years ago, I don't know, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, we had a slogan, "What would Jesus do?" I'd like to bring the slogan back, but change the verb. What would Jesus say? And I think the import of this question is there something we would want the Vatican to say?
Hmm.
Let's not even ask the content of what. Do we want the Vatican to participate? That's I think, a valid question.
Yeah.
The Holy See, the seat of Peter. I don't know. What does it mean for a ugly, intentional, vulgar act of terrorism? How do you add religious commentary to Muslim terrorists who are stated eliminationists? What can you say? And so the attempt to say something produced a product that the Israeli government called deplorable.
Mm-hmm.
They used the idiom, according to the article, specifically because the Vatican had previously referred to anti-Semitism as deplorable.
Yeah.
Look, I didn't expect the Vatican to have a role on the 8th, 9th, 10th. I don't know what we expect of a religious activist pope,
And
who is more frail and comes from Argentina, where liberationist theology would suggest he's probably more on the socialist side.
mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's all fair and true.
I guess what the article did for me was ask the question, and it's an uncomfortable question: should everybody have something to say? And maybe if there is nothing to say, you can't equivocate, you can't create a sentence in which both parties are, we don't like that. There aren't good people on both sides of every experience. Okay, so maybe I'm praying for the souls of those massacred and praying for leaders to lead. Yeah, okay. Sometimes clergy have to say nothing because they were required to say something.
I've thought about this before. Clearly, when people use the phrase "you're in our thoughts and prayers" after a mass shooting, that's meant to keep the issue at arm's length. But at the same time,
it's a defense. Yes.
But at the same time, the dismissal of it reveals an assumption that prayer doesn't actually do anything. And you know, and I think we live in such a hyper politicized moment that we're the Pope just to pray, like you just mentioned. It would be derided as a lack of engagement.
Good. And so that's why I want to bring back the slogan, but change from do to say. So that we can struggle with that. Maybe sometimes I don't have something to say. Because of the world in which we live, anything I say will be overly thought, immediately parsed,
used against you in a court of law.
So maybe I should model as the Holy See. There's nothing to say. October 7th was ghastly beyond words. And because I don't have a foreign policy license.
So just this is from the article. On November 12th, more than 400 rabbis and scholars involved in interreligious dialogue signed an open letter urging Francis to extend a hand in solidarity to the Jewish community. For example, by distinguishing Hamas's terrorist massacre aimed at killing as many civilians as possible from the civilian casualties of Israelis' war of self-defense. The next week, Francis met with a dozen relatives of the hostages and then met with 10 relatives of Palestinians killed or jailed by Israel since October 7th. Emerging from their meeting, the Palestinians told reporters that Francis had spoken of Israel's campaign as, quote, genocide. The Vatican spokesman, Matteo Bruni, later denied that he had. The Washington Post then reported that during a phone call in October, Francis had told Israel's president, Isaac Herzog, that it is forbidden to respond to terror with terror. Yeah, I mean, it's...
You know, the three friends in the book of Job are among the most reliable, but they're put there in the narrative for a reason. And if you're a congregational clergy person, you have met those three friends.
or been them.
You know them. Yes, he said that. He equivocated because he's trying to be good to both. You can't be good to both. Admit it. Own it. What would Jesus say? That's worth thinking about. Because I'm convinced the Judean, the Jew, might have simply kicked over the tables in the temple. He said something. He really said something. Sometimes that's what you should do. How do you say something in the face of October 7th? How do you say something in the face of a massacre at the synagogue in Pittsburgh? Well, we learn pastorally that there are times when you say nothing, you hold a hand, offer a hug, look deeply into the face of someone who has experienced trauma. I'm here. That's what you say.
The article part of the article mentions Francis being accused of equivocation at the beginning of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, trying to keep both sides on his side, so to speak. Yeah, so it's I think just thinking of the Pope. I think a lot of people believed that with the loss of political power that the Vatican once had came a lot of moral power, and certainly John Paul II wielded that power. But one of the things the article is mentioning is that maybe this is a conflict that reveals that, well, actually no, the Pope doesn't have any power.
Or my fantasy that the Pope's power is in modeling quiet, reflective discernment. You can't please everybody after a terrorist attack. We're going to have a ceasefire. And during that ceasefire, hostages will be released. The remains of some dead hostages will be given back. And Palestinian prisoners convicted of terrorist acts who have murdered Israelis will be released. What is there to say? Because when that occurs, it will be affirmed this was the purpose of October 7th. We're getting to why they did this. No, sometimes there's nothing to say. They will need to give back prisoners that should not be returned. That's the ransom of a kidnapping. Yeah. But we live in an age where terrorism / freedom fighters. Okay, I would rather be silent and have someone wonder, what? You don't have a comment? Then have whatever I say be lame, shallow, and not describe reality. And that's the value of this piece.
Yeah, an example of that. An example of that. So I hear, and we've gotten comments about this. So there's a lot of insistence and attention paid on social media, especially about Palestinian Christians and the plight of Christians in Palestine. And this article makes the good, factual reminder. In this region dense with proto-Catholic history, Catholics themselves are few. As William Dalrymple in his 1997 book observed, fewer Palestinian Christians now remain in Palestine than live outside it. He added that the remaining Christians in Jerusalem could be flown out in just nine jumbo jets. There has been further attrition since. In 2023, prior to the Israeli-Hamas war, Christians made up 2% of the population of Israel and just 1% of the population of the West Bank.
Okay. They weren't the focus of the terrorist attack. And we Jews are talking about the fact that terrorists have killed Jews all over the world. India, France, not just Israel. The murder and hatred of Jews is not immediately correctly linked to Israel's policy over the Palestinians.
I just
So
I think, and this is just my own. I sometimes feel that we are encouraged, the global we are encouraged to remember Christians in Palestine, out of a sense of like, well, if Christians aren't going to care about Muslims getting killed, maybe they'll care about Christians getting killed, um, and that sort of pivot, I think, obscures just how few there are.
and when and we've gotten comments about our conversations, we should have some Palestinian Christians. You should invite Palestinian Christians to be the other side
Mm-hmm.
of what this conversation is. But Hamas is a radical Islamist terrorist body that is not represented by Palestinian Christians.
Mm-hmm.
This conflict is not to be equivocated with, if we could take care of Palestinian Christians, Edelheit's concerns about the hatred of Jews would then be balanced. No. This is about a group that has told everyone for decades, we hate them. We don't want them. So the Vatican, at least in this little article, could have, and I think should have, said, we have nothing productive to add. Fault us for silence.
Yeah, the article ends by saying, and this applies beyond just the Pope. This is your point, I think, Joseph. The wars between Russia and Ukraine, between Hamas and Israel, have made clear that the effects of a Pope's words are limited at best. And yet the rhetorical controversies surrounding those conflicts suggest a role and a responsibility for the Pope and other moral authorities, one that involves describing acts of war forthrightly while questioning their necessity and their scope.
Yes. The massacre of terror cannot be equivocated with a war to defend that community. It is not Israel's right to defend itself. I disagree with that. It is Israel's duty to defend itself. So, this was not initiated by Israel. If you want to argue about Israeli policies regarding occupation, let's have at it. Let's do that. We are involved in a conflict initiated by a radical Muslim terrorist organization. That was what the Vatican should have responded to. And it can't. It did not have something to say. Then just say, I don't know what to say. I can't say anything that won't make me look foolish. In order to save ourselves from the complete destruction of language, given the world in which we live, we're going to have to find times to model. I have nothing to say.
Yeah.
And my sense is Jesus would have understood that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, that makes me think of, when Jesus finally has his moment before Pontius Pilate, uh, he's reticent to say very much at all.
And the text says, that's what you say. And I think it's a profound model. And whoever the authors and editors of those gospels are, language does not have the structure in social cultural reality to hold up under all circumstances. So you're correct. You're in our thoughts and prayers is getting close to being obscene.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have the courage and political wherewithal to make the changes necessary. Sorry, your child was murdered. It's more honest than you're in our thoughts and prayers.
But it's in the prayer does something that Facebook likes do not do.
Or a thumbs up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's my hope that those who are still serving in the vineyard of the Lord, active clergy people, will begin as we move deeper and deeper into the dark political forest to model. I have nothing to say. There are times when it's appropriate to be speechless.
And it's I've been listening to Timothy Snyder's book, The Road to Unfreedom, about Ukraine. And one of the lessons of that book is that, for example, Trumpism is, the book does a helpful job of lifting you out of the current moment to see that Trumpism is part of a much larger international story of Russia versus the West. And I think one of the reasons why we need to do what you're suggesting is the story is too big for us to, if we're just responding to what's right in front of us moment to moment, day to day, we can't really see the big story and history happening.
And Snyder is a perfect scholarly example. He is a Holocaust scholar.
Mm-hmm.
He is a historian that has specialized in helping us understand how the nature of the Holocaust was encapsulated inside global indifference.
Yeah.
Okay, in the Pavlovian sphere, how many different times do we continue to learn the same lesson? This time it will be different, I'm sure. And we do it again.
Well, and I mean, and Snyder would say that we keep making the same mistakes because we think that history is inevitable,
Right.
rather than something we are creating. And so there's like a kind of passivity to just watching things happen, and of course, of course it happens again.
I would say we are in a unique moment, and I don't mean unique in any construct of superiority. The president of Brazil Lula refers to Gaza using Hitler and Auschwitz, doubles down on saying it again without Hitler and Auschwitz, but using the word genocide. Then Sunday, Bolsonaro, who is on trial for insurrection, stands on a veranda in front of hundreds of thousands of people carrying an Israeli flag. Okay. Which of these paths goes to Oz?
Well,
okay. Let's be more conscious about dividing the community and manipulating the less than 150,000 Jews who live in Brazil.
So how did you all get your president on trial for insurrection already? Like that seems to be too fast.
It's a wonderful story. The intricacies of the legal system in Brazil. Remember, Brazil is a young democracy. 1988. From 64 to 88, there was a military regime. So they're still learning democracy. As someone who was filled with hope and a purpose, as I chose the rabbinate, as I chose to be in the vineyard of the Lord, I now look back over 50 years and wonder, did I miss? Did I not open an envelope and miss the notice before there was email? How did I not see this coming? We're leaderless. And in the scope of 48 hours, here is the current president and the past president, and they are modeling. Doesn't matter what I say. And that's the dark political undertone to the New Yorker article. It doesn't matter what I say, as long as I give you something for me to say. But it does matter. And we need to start telling people, please say nothing.
So, speaking of saying, talk a little bit about this second piece that you sent me. Everybody's talking about anti-Zionism.
Oh, I think we are. This is the second article I gave you. We had spoken about Shaul Magid's book before. Now we're beginning to collect various points of view. Look, October 7th has changed the way Jews understand themselves in relation to Israel. There's a brand new book out about Alfred Dreyfus. I'm going to buy it this afternoon.
Okay.
In the same series as the Elijah book I sent you.
Oh,
so
okay.
Look, Zionism is an essential element of modern Jewish identity. Is it possible we've outlived that philosophy? Is it possible that the need to be a people in a land has come to fruition, and whatever that meant no longer means what we want it to mean? I am linked to the reality of Israel. That may not be what Zionism means anymore. Okay, what is the term? I think that essay, that little article, is about Jews thinking out loud. What do we mean about our relationship to Zion? And it means lots of things. There was a primary yesterday in which Democrats in Michigan who are from Palestinian /Arab backgrounds did not vote for Biden.
They voted for Dean Phillips.
What?
They voted for Dean Phillips?
No, he wasn't on the ballot. They didn't vote. So, okay, Israel means something different to Christian Zionists. Which Christian Zionist? Jon Stewart's brilliant comedic analysis of the crisis, in which, when he wants to quote a Christian, was bold enough correctly to quote John Hagee and the apocalypse. Right. You don't want the Vatican? Here's John Hagee. Why not? Okay, I can't be included in anything Hagee says. What does Zionism mean? I can't be included in anything this current Israeli government says. What do I mean? I need to think out loud about my relationship to Zionism. I don't mean a Zionism that comes after the Balfour Declaration and just before independence. That's a different Zionism. A Zionism that occurs between 1948 and 1973, a different Zionism. 73 to different. Maybe the word no longer conveys what we mean. That's why I sent that to you. Because we're now going to publicly engage the topic and confuse everyone. I don't think anti-Zionism is correct any more than Zionism is correct. We don't know. Is it about an idea or is it about the reality? Okay, give us some time. The war hasn't ended. I don't know what the trauma means. Purim will come on Palm Sunday, and on Purim, you are supposed to read the book of Esther, but the last 2 chapters of the book of Esther are purposefully about revenge, the killing, the impaling of Haman's family. I've never been comfortable reading them. The tradition says by that point in Purim, you should be drunk enough that you can do it in one breath. There are synagogues who won't read the last 2 chapters. Maybe this year you should stop and teach about revenge. Okay, what are you going to do in a country that may still be fighting a war? The Minister of Education says children should not come to school dressed up in costumes that make people afraid. So you can't dress up like a Hamas terrorist. Okay, let's see. Children can't dress up in costumes that make us afraid of the reality in which we're living. It's not nonsensical, it's real.
Yeah.
So there's a op-ed today in the New York Times about people in Michigan who are Jewish anti-Zionists. They're pro-peace, and their opposition to the Israeli government is framed as anti-Zionism. Maybe we don't have the words to describe the complexity, the ambiguity. So that article is a representative of the ambiguity that the Vatican article affirms. We're living through a period of transition. There's a cardinal in Jerusalem that's on the short list. Okay. I don't know what that means. Look, I don't want Hagee to represent me. I'm sad that Francis can't represent me. I want Jason Micheli to represent me. But Jason doesn't want to represent anybody but himself and maybe Annandale. Who represents me in the Christian community? Those who engage in the complexity and ambiguity of the contemporary Jewish reality. I'm a Zionist. I'm not sure I can use that term without then saying, depending on who's listening and how you understand that word.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say it's like the first Protestant reformers were known as evangelicals, and so part of me resists letting go of that word, and at the same time, the word is completely fraught with other meanings.
Right. So if we take the packed idiom Christian nationalist, weren't the Puritans the original Christian nationalists? Okay. Everything has its own momentary historical context. And if you're not sure about whether you've passed that historical context, you don't know whether the words you're using mean what you think they're using.
So, related to ambiguity, the last article you sent for discussion was, "I feel less moral clarity about the war than ever. Am I alone?" by Jay Michelson. Talk a little bit about this.
In the foreword, an American Jew, a rabbi who has moved from October 7th to this past week, and the fears of an attack in Rafah. At what point are we unconditional in the necessity of defending ourselves? And now the violence has moved beyond what we can support. When you're a Jew in public communal service, you have to be careful. Your children aren't going to be called up to serve in the IDF, Israel Defense Forces. If you live outside the state of Israel, be careful. Your opinion doesn't cost you as much as those living there. So I thought it was a profound statement of personal moral evolution. And the title, I don't have the same moral clarity. I have moved, but I'm out of focus. That was what I kept thinking about. Yes, you've lost focus. The perspective has changed. Of course, the perspective has changed from the first 2 weeks, the first month. There's no way to look at the reality today and remain as unconditional as you were after 1 month. No. How can I be as certain? I can't. And I think this blog post is an example of Jews everywhere who reacted to the massacre and the certainty we can't be passive in our response. Yes, we cannot be passive. I don't know where the tipping point was, Jason. After 2 months, 3 months, I don't know when I understood that Netanyahu was going to determine his endpoint in relation to his power.
Yeah.
I don't trust the decision making. I no longer am represented by the decision making. So here I am, and I don't have any skin in the game. I have family there. So I'm not going to be in opposition, but I do like this idea. I've lost moral clarity.
Yeah, it's there's a passage here I think that is important. Increasingly, the discourse on Israel and Palestine is beginning to look like American polarization more generally, with each side inhabiting its own media, communal, and rhetorical universes. And yet, for those who, like me, are neither on the hard left nor the hard right, who want a bilateral ceasefire that includes the release of all hostages and the cessation of all the bombing, for people like me, the answer is not straightforward at all. We don't have access to the military intelligence on which Israel says it's relying, and we can't assess whether any of its actions have realistic strategic goals. In addition, whatever doubts one has about Israel's campaign and the motives of the political leaders informing it, the primary moral responsibility for all of this rests with Hamas's gang of genocidal war criminals. And other international parties are not free of scrutiny either, particularly Egypt, which is so determined to keep out Gazan refugees that it's currently erecting a wall to keep them from entering Egyptian territory. This is all a maelstrom, a storm of unknowing and pain.
Couldn't write it better. And it goes back to the Vatican. He has nothing to say. He's caught in the immediate past and the instantaneous present. Well, okay, this is where we are. Hamas has not changed. It continues to repeat, just in case someone hasn't understood its eliminationist goals. It won't be destroyed. As Jon Stewart said on Monday night, you can't bomb an idea. Okay, correct. He said it. I agree. So what is there to do? Are there parties who are willing to risk and try a different what? There's no relationship. There's no trust. Maybe we simply need to end violence. We should simply speak about that as the only goal.
I know, so in my previous congregation here in Northern Virginia, I had a number of senators and people who work in the Pentagon and in the White House on the, and I was there for 14 years. And even though I'm a news junkie, their presence in the congregation made me aware that my forte is not is not politics. It's not like the military. It's not intelligence. It's not foreign policy. And so maybe I should hew closer to what I've actually been trained in. And I think this article there are things we don't know. And even the things that we do know, there are things that we are not experts at. And so maybe we should cease opining online about things to which we're amateurs.
We should go back to the grisly model of the three friends in the book of Job. Oh my God. Could you not say that? And not only don't we know, but even if we think we do know, maybe sometimes you have nothing to say. So this last blog post comes close to admitting, my God, what is there to do? I'm out of focus. I don't have perspective anymore. So I will say nothing.
You know, one of the last paragraphs. The right and the left are mirror images of one another. Each is certain that the other side is evil, and each is opposed to coexistence. Maybe the real conflict isn't between right and left after all, but between those who yearn for coexistence and those who oppose it, for either right wing or left wing reasons. Certainty is a delusion.
Not only is it a delusion, certainty is what we've become addicted to.
Mm-hmm.
It is now part of the problem.
Yeah.
How do we engage by admitting? I have no idea.
And yeah, I don't know that we treat. I think the press does a poor job of contextualizing the complexity of
Yes.
of this. So because not only is it a story that goes back at least as far as the Holocaust, it is also a story that you can't properly tell without also telling the story of Putin's ideological agenda with Eastern Europe and Iran and China. Like this is not a regional or ethnic conflict that is specific to Israel.
We need to spend more time understanding how little we understand about the difference between the Shia and the Sunni. We can't talk about Islamophobia anymore. It's an incorrect word. We're not afraid of them. We don't know them.
That's fair.
So, yes, I gave you those 3 articles in order to introduce the fact that as we move toward whatever we will call this, ceasefire, whatever, we should begin to find ways to learn to say, I don't know. You know, your family's going to Disney World, and I just thought of this image. And there's a yardstick, a little character, and if you don't measure up, you can't go on the ride. You're not tall enough. Okay, is there a way of doing that so people won't talk?
Well, as a short person, I appreciate that analogy.
But you have different stature, not to be measured by a yardstick, Jason.
Well, Joseph, it's good to talk to you again, and I look forward to Monday. I will be back in time for Monday night.
And I will try and find the passages that I want and send them to you, since it might be easier for me to do that than you're looking in a digital format.
Well, I just ordered the hard copy, so it should be here in time.
Okay.
Take care.
Have a great